Today we are going to build a chatbot using Gemini and React. But not just any chatbot. We're going to build a context-aware chatbot. Imagine you have a product manual of a washing machine, a TV, or a drone. Instead of flipping through 100 pages, you can just upload it into your app and boom! Gemini does two things for you. It generates a smart summary of it and it answers any questions you want about it instantly. You want to learn how to take off with your brand new drone? Just ask the chatbot and get right to it with AI assistance. So that's the project we're going to build today from the absolute beginning using React and the Gemini JavaScript SDK. Before we get started, please hit the like button and subscribe to the Web Schools so you don't miss my next tutorials on AI and web development. So now let's go build this project. In this video, we're going to create the React project we're going to be using in this section. So first, let's open a new terminal and we need to check if we already have Node.js installed. For that, you can just type node-v. If you see a version like I'm seeing right here, you are good to go. Even if it's a different version, it shouldn't be a problem. On the other hand, if you are seeing an error here, it means first you need to install Node.js. So first, go to nodejs.org and download the recommended version for your operating system. Then install it on your machine and you can come back to Visual Studio Code and make the same test. Once you have Node.js, the next thing you're going to need is Vite. So for that, you can also type vite-v. As you can see, I already have it. If this is not the case for you, you can install it by typing npm i vite-g. You can then press enter and this is going to install Vite globally on your machine so you can start using it. So Vite is a development environment that's going to make it easier for us to create and run our React applications. Before creating the project, make sure to be in the desired folder. So as you can see, I'm already inside the course folder. If this is not the case for you, you can just go to File, Open Folder, and you can open the course folder. And once we create a new React application using Vite, a new folder is going to be automatically created. So let's type npm create Vite. We press enter. Now we need to choose a name for the project. I'm going to name it document-image processing. Now let's choose a framework. For this project, we're going to use React. This is going to make it easier for us to build the user interface and to interact with Google AI. So just use your arrow keys and press enter to choose React. Now let's choose JavaScript. And let's open the new folder created for this project. So again, open folder. It is right here. I just forgot to add the number. So let me do it now. This is going to be project 3. All right, now let's open it up. And here we have our new React application. If we go inside the source folder, this is where we are going to be working most of the time. Now, before running this in the web browser, every time you have a new React project, either one you created or one you just cloned from someone else, you always have to install all dependencies before you get started. So let's go to terminal, new terminal, and let's type npm i to do that. Now, if we look at the top here, we can see that the node modules folder have been created, and this shows that all dependencies are installed. If you go to the package.json file, you will see these dependencies. So these are the extensions that must be installed for the application to run properly. And here we have the scripts we can use to run or to build the application. The one we are looking for is the Vite command, which is going to start the development server. So let's go to terminal, new terminal, and type Vite. Now we can see that this project is already running locally. Let's copy this URL, go to the web browser, we paste it here. Now let me split the screen. Now that we have our application running, let's do some cleanup so we can start working. So let me open the File Explorer. The first thing I'm going to do is to delete all the CSS. Let's create things from the absolute beginning. So let's go to the app.jsx. I'm going to delete this import from here, and I'm going to delete the contents of the app.css file. So Control or Command A, delete. Now let's save this. Now let's go to the index.css and let's also delete everything we have here. I'm just going to create a global selector with the asterisk so we can reset the margins and paddings of all elements. Just to make sure we start from the absolute beginning, let's go to the index.html. Let's just change the name of our app. All right, now let's go to the app.jsx. Let me just close the File Explorer so we can see this better. And I'm going to delete everything inside this component except the fragment. So let's leave the fragment there. Now we can also delete these two imports because we are not going to be using those logos. We delete the use state and also the creation of these state variables right here. And now this is starting from the absolute beginning. Now let's go to the prototype to take a look at what we're building again. I've shared the link for this, but you don't have to worry because we're going to be writing the CSS ourselves, and for the longer parts, I'm going to provide them for you. But just so we can remember what we need to do, this is going to be the start screen. So this has this title area, or we can call it a header. And then we have the file input. So we can start by uploading an image or a document. Once we do it, we are going to show the summary and a chat so we can ask questions about this document. So let's start with these elements first. Going back to Visual Studio Code, when working with React, let's remember to always separate things in components. This is going to make our code much cleaner and more maintainable. So I'm going to open a new folder. Let's call it components. And inside, I'm going to create one called header. The extension is JSX. We can copy the structure from the app.jsx to make this a bit faster. Let's just change the names here. So header and header. Don't forget, it must be done with capital letters like this. And instead of starting with a fragment, let's use the header element instead to make it more semantic. And inside, we are going to have an age 1. You can choose any title for your app. I'm calling mine Doc Insight. Below, we have a paragraph. Again, you can write whatever you want here. So I just made this text up, learn from PDF documents and images. Now we also have a horizontal row. All right, we can save this, close this component. Now going back to the app.jsx, let's remember to import it first. So I'm going to import the header from /components/header. Now let's remember that in React, we use components as HTML elements. So let's create a new element for the header. We don't need the closing tag. We can close it from here. So we save this and we are now seeing the content for that component. Now let's create the component for the file upload. So going inside the components folder, let's create a new file called file upload. And we can just copy the structure from the header. For this one, we can start with a section. Now here there's an age 2 where we say get started. And down below we have the file input. Now let me break a few lines for these attributes. Let's go back to the app component. Let's add this component here. So let's import it first. So again, components/file upload. Now we can use it down here. We save this. Now we can See that component showing? Now we just need to add a page container. So these things are aligned to the center of the page. So going to the global CSS for the app, which is the index.css. Now, as I've mentioned, to save some time, I'm going to be providing the CSS for this. You can copy all the CSS content that I left. We're going to go through this in a moment. First, let's just copy this, go back there, and we can paste it down here. Or actually, we already have the global selector, so we can reset things. So this one at the top is not needed anymore. We can start from the import statement, which is importing the Montserrat font that we are using in this project. We can see right here. And then we are setting this as the font family for the project. And the rest here is just basic stuff. I'm just adding some paddings, margins, creating the page container, and setting the font sizes for the H1, H2, P, and HR. So that's basically it. Now we can save this. Now let's see if the container is working. We can see it isn't, because if we go back to the app.jsx, we haven't included the container yet. So let's do that now. I'm going to add a main element with a class of container. And I'm going to place everything inside the container. And once we save this, we can see that now this is showing in the center of the page as it should be. So that's it. That's the basic structure we need to get started. This is the header of the app, which is going to be shown on all screens. And here we're going to start by uploading a document. And once we do it, we're going to go to the next screen so we can show the summary and the chat. So we are inside file upload.jsx, which is the component we created for that. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to delete the ID and name attributes. We are not going to need them. And I'm going to include one called accept. And this attribute serves for limiting the file types we're going to accept. In this case, to work with the Gemini API for this use case, it has to be either PDF documents or images. So let's create a list of these files. So we are going to accept PDF, JPG, JPEG, and PNG. Now another thing we need here is the onChange event. So whenever we upload a file, we can run a function. So in React, let's remember that we need to add it in camel case like this. So onChange, right here, we're going to use the curly braces so we can pass something dynamic. In this case, we're just going to execute a function that we're going to create outside of the template. So we can call this handle file upload. All right, now we need to go inside the file upload function, but outside the return statement. So at the top here, I'm going to create a new function called handle file upload. Let's create a constant for the file. And here we can pass an argument called event that's going to automatically get the file attached to this event. So here we can do event.target.files. And in this case, we are only accepting one file at a time. So we can use index 0. And that's what we need for this case. Now here, I'm going to do a console.log for the file just so we can see if we were able to get it. Now we can save this and let's try uploading a file. So here we have a PDF manual for a drone. We have a picture of a famous painting by Da Vinci. We have a picture of a real place, the Louvre Museum, and we have a picture of Ronaldo. As you can see, I'm not giving any hints in the names. I just named them manual, painting, picture, and picture 2 because we really need to see if Google will be able to understand the content of these files. So going back to our app, let me open the inspector. I'm gonna put it under the page just so we have more space here. I think here it's gonna be okay. Let me open the console and let me try uploading one of those files. So let me try maybe the painting first. I'm gonna click open. And as you can see, we are seeing that function being fired. which means that we are detecting a change event to this input field. We are getting the first file of this array, which, as I explained, since we are only allowing one file at a time, this is always going to be index 0. If you want to accept multiple files at a time, you would have to add a multiple attribute like this, and then you would have to treat it as an array. So to simplify this project, I'm not going to use the multiple attribute, and we are always going to be working with one file at a time. So in this example, we were able to upload the file, and we can see that we got it from the JavaScript side, and we can see the content of this file showing right here. Now we need to check if this is in the format we need to send to Google. So let's go to the documentation on ai.google.dev. Let's go to models, and under Gemini, let's go to docs. And what we're looking for is the document understanding section. So let's scroll down to see an example. And as you can see, the file is stored as an array buffer. And then before being sent to Google, it has to be converted to a base 64 string. The reason why Google does this is because the array buffer is a raw binary format that makes the process of transferring files more efficient. And the base 64 string is the format that is compatible with most APIs. So let's go back there and adjust it to our use case. When we get the file, let's also convert it into an array buffer. And for that, let's use the await, because we need to make sure this process is finished before we continue. And we are going to use the native array buffer method. And this is going to make the conversion to array buffer. Now we are seeing this being highlighted because in order to use the await, the function has to be async. So let's include async before the name of the function. And now it seems everything is correct. Now we still need to convert this to the base 64 string. But first, let's make a quick test and see if we can find any difference. So I'm going to save this. Let's refresh the page. Let's choose the file again. And now we can see that this is being stored as an array buffer. Now, one thing we need to adjust is also storing the file type, because if we go back to the documentation, let's remember that when we send this to Google, not only we have to have an array buffer converted into a base 64 string, but also we need to tell Google what is the file type. This is not going to be recognized automatically. So let's store this so we can use later. So let's make a quick change here. I'm going to name this one file upload instead. And then I'm going to create a new one called file. This is going to be the one we're going to use. And this is going to be an object that is going to have a type, which we can get straight from the uploaded file. Let's remember that inside the file we had a few properties, and one of them was the type. And let's also create another property for the file itself, which in this case can be the file upload converted into an array buffer. Now we send it to the console. Let's see if this is working. So I'm going to save this. Let's upload the file again. Now, as you can see, we have this object. So we are storing the file type that we are going to need later. And we also have the file stored as an array buffer. Now, there's just one thing we need to do. Remember, we need to convert this into a base 64 string. So let's do that now. For this, we are going to use an extension that's going to make things easier. So let's open a new terminal and let's run npm install buffer. Let me just put this a bit bigger. So this is the command you need to run, npm install buffer. Let's press enter. Let me put this back. And now if we go to the package.json file, we can see that buffer has been added as a dependency. So we are going to use this to make the conversion we need. Now, once we have this, we need to import it first. So at the top, this time outside of the file upload function, let's import. Don't forget to use the curly braces, and we are going to import buffer from buffer, which is the library we just installed. So once we do this, let me just close the file explorer so we have more space. Once we do this, it's going to be easy to convert into the format we want. So right here, we can just do buffer.from. So we are going to get from this array buffer, and then we are going to convert this into string of type base64. So now we have the file type. We have the file in the format we are going to need to send to Google. So this should be all we need for the file upload functionality. Let me just save this to see if this is working. So let's choose the file. Let's choose the painting. Now, as you can see, we have the file type and we have the file stored in the format we need. It's time to pass it to the other components that will do the connection with the Google AI API. So let's create a new component right inside the components folder, and I'm going to name this one summary. We're going to have two components, summary and chat. So each one has their own responsibilities. So this one is summary.jsx, and we can create the one for the chat later. Let's copy the structure of the header component. I normally use an extension to create these components faster, but in this case, since we only have a few components, copying and pasting the structure is okay. So this one is the summary. Don't forget to use capital letters in the beginning, otherwise this is not going to work. And right here, I'm just going to add a section, and let's add a class name of summary. Remember that this is how we should do with React. We don't use the class attribute, but class name. This is how it works in JSX files. I'm just going to type the summary goes here, just so we test if this is working. And now we have this component. We can close this. We can go to the app component and we can import it from here. And we can use it here. Now down here, we are not going to show both. We are not going to show the file upload and the summary at the same time. Instead, we are going to do conditional rendering. Because if we don't have any files yet, then we are going to show the upload component. But once we upload the file successfully, we can hide this one and show the summary instead. So to do that, let's use a state variable. So let's import useState. Don't forget to use the curly braces and import it from React. Now we can go inside the app function. Let's create a new variable. This is going to be a state variable, so the way we create it is a bit different. In React, we are going to use braces, and we need one variable for the data and one for the setter function. In this case, I'm going to call it uploaded file, and the setter function is going to be called set uploaded file. Just be a bit careful with the way you write this. Remember, JavaScript is case sensitive. So in this case, it's U that's capitalized. And here we are going to bring the use state hook. And between parentheses, we are going to pass the initial value, which is going to start at null because we don't have any file uploaded yet. So we can save this, and now we are going to be able to use the value of this variable, and every time it changes, we are going to re-render the other components accordingly. And now we are going to be able to do cool things like a conditional rendering. So let's add the curly braces down here, and we are going to test if we already have an uploaded file. So we are going to bring this variable here. If we have a value, this is going to return true. So we are going to use a ternary conditional, which is a normal way of doing conditional rendering in React. So if we have something, we are going to show the summary component. If we don't have anything, so colon, we are going to show the file upload component instead. So let's see if this is working. I'm going to save this and refresh the page. We can see that the file upload component is showing because we don't have anything in this variable. But if we change this value to true, now we can see that the file upload component went away, and the one we are seeing is the summary component, which is exactly what we wanted. Now let's just put it back to null because obviously we're not going to be changing this manually. We need a way to, when we upload a file inside this component, we send it to this variable. The way we do it in React is using props. This is the simpler way of doing it. If this was a more complex, larger application, we would need a state management system like Redux, but in this case, we can just leave the main variable in the parent component, which is the app component, and pass it to the child components using props. So in this case, I'm going to add a prop, and I'm going to call it set file. Let's not confuse this with the set uploaded file, and I'm choosing a different name on purpose just so we don't mix these things. So this is a function that's going to be called set file, and when we execute this function from the child component, the parent component will then execute the set uploaded file one. So we can put it here. So every time we execute this function from inside here, we are going to execute the setter function for this state variable, which is going to change the value of it. Now we need to go inside the file upload component. Let me just copy the name of this prop. Let me save this. Let's go here and I'm going to create this prop. We need to pass it inside curly braces. And now what we're going to do is the following. Instead of sending it to the console, we are going to execute it here. So we are going to execute this function with something attached, which is the file. Once this event is detected from the parent component, it is going to run the setter function. We don't need to add the arguments here because this is going to be done automatically. So we can save this and let's see if this is working. I'm going to upload the file. Let's upload the painting. We do this, and now as you can see, just by uploading the file upload component went away and we are now seeing the summary, which is very good. Now one thing we need is to pass the uploaded file to this component because we're going to have to send it to Google, and this is going to happen inside here. You could also do it from the app component, but like I said, it's a good practice to create smaller components in React and each of them with one single responsibility. So the app has the responsibility of holding this variable with the file. The file upload component has the responsibility of handling the upload and nothing more. And we are going to have the summary to generate the summary using AI. And later we are also going to have the chat component. So again, the way we are going to pass this to the child component is also going to be using props. This is going to be slightly different because this is not a function. We just want to pass the data. So let's add a prop called file. And we are going to pass the uploaded file like this. Now we go inside the summary component. We need to create this prop here. Don't forget to add the curly braces. And let's just make a quick test to see if we have access to the file from here. So I'm going to do console.log file. And let's see if we are able to get it from this side. So saving this, let's refresh the page. So we have nothing. We have no file uploaded. So we are seeing the file upload component. Let's pick a file. Open it up. Now we see the component changing and we can see that we have access to the file. So now from inside here, we need to connect with Google AI so we can get the summary for the uploaded file. So let's go to the documentation. Let's remember that this is in ai.google.dev. You can just go to models and under Gemini, go to docs. And here we are inside document understanding. So let's scroll down. The part we are going to need is this one because we already did The upload, we also converted to base 64 string already, so we are going to have to change this slightly. But first, let's copy this. Now going back there, we can delete the console.log now that we know that the file is here, and we can paste that code. Let me just adjust the indentation, and let's remember that what we are passing is an object, and we have a file property and a type property. So let's replace them here. So this is going to come from file, and the name of the property is also file. And the type is going to be inside file.type. Now this is being highlighted again because we are using await, and this is not an async function. So what we're going to do here instead is creating a function. Let's make it async. Let's call it get summary. Now inside here, we can do all this. Now we don't have that problem anymore. Now we still need to send the API key to Google AI and also create the model variable. So let's go back to the documentation. We're going to need these pieces of code right here. So let's copy this and go back there. Now let me paste everything at the top here, but only the import is going to be outside. The other two lines of code will have to be inside the summary function. So before we call get summary, we're going to create these variables. Now first we need to install the Google Generative AI library so we can use it like this. So we can just copy the name from here, go to the terminal and run npm install or npm I as a shortcut, Google Generative AI. Now we can close the terminal. Now we need to replace our API key right here. So let's delete this. I'm going to paste my API key. You can do that on your end as well. So I'm going to save this, and just to see if this is working, let's not forget to run this function right here. So this is going to run once when this component is loaded. Later, we're going to adjust this a little bit so we can add a loader, and we are going to use the use effect hook, which is going to be better for this case. But for this example, this is enough. We are starting this component, creating the model for the Google AI SDK. We are sending the uploaded file, asking it to summarize the document, and then we are going to send the result to the console. So we can now save this. Let's go back there. Let's refresh the page. Upload the file again. So let me choose the Louvre Museum. We do this. We can see that the summary is already showing, and now we are seeing the summary for that photo. Remember that we didn't give any hints in the file name. We just named it picture. So we can see that Google was able to identify that this is a photo of the Louvre Museum, and it is bringing us the summary. You might be wondering why this is running twice. This is a side effect of something that we use in development. So if you go to the main.jsx file, you will see that we are using the strict mode. And this is good for development, but it causes the application to run twice. So if you're bothered by it, you can just remove the strict mode. And once you try again, you can see that now this is running only once. So this is great. This is exactly what we wanted. We are now being able to upload files, send it to Google AI, and we are receiving a summary. Now we need to adjust this component so we can show the summary. So here I'm going to add an h2. We can call it summary. And right here I'm going to add a p, and we are going to show the summary. So in order to do that, we're going to need a state variable. So right here, let's create one. Let's call it summary. And remember, we always need a setter function as well. So this is going to be called set summary. Then we use the use state hook. And this is going to start as an empty string. Now we can see that Visual Studio Code already added the useState import. If this is not the case for you, remember to add the import statement. So this is right here. This is going to start as an empty string. Now we can use it down here. And inside the function, instead of sending the text to the console, we are going to use the set summary setter function. And we are going to assign the response we received from Google. So we can save this now. Let's try again. I'm going to choose a file. Let's choose the Louvre Museum. Now we received the summary and display to the user, but as you can see, there's a bug here. This is running over and over again in kind of like an infinite loop. And the reason why this is happening is because now we created a state variable so we can use to show the summary, which means that every time this variable changes, we're going to re-render the component so we can show the updated summary. But every time the component loads, we are going to run this line. So this is why we are inside an infinite loop. Because the component loads, we run this line. When the summary variable changes, we re-render the component so we can show it here. And then we are going to run this function again. So this is not the correct way of running this function. Instead, we are going to use a use effect hook, which is the correct way. And we are also going to add a loading state. So let me just refresh the page so this doesn't keep running over and over again. And up here, right after we import the use state, let's also import the use effect. And the way this works is the following. We call the use effect hook. Inside here, we are going to pass a function that we want to run. So we can be an arrow function like this. And this is the code that we are going to run when the application loads. This is going to run every time any state variable changes. If you want to limit to specific state variables, you can come here and add another argument, which is going to be an array of state variables. So in this case, we only want to run this when we have the summary. But the problem here is that the same thing is going to keep happening because the summary will change. We run this again and exactly the same problem we were seeing will happen again. So the way we handle this in React is the following. Actually, not the way, but one of the ways. We can create a new state variable and we're going to call it status. So we can create one called status and one called set status. This is going to start, so use state. Now here we pass the initial value and we are going to start with a state of idle. So why are we doing this? Because then when we enter the use effect, instead of running this every time the summary changes, we are only going to run when the status changes. And when we go inside, we are only going to run it again if the status is idle. So we can add an if statement here. And we can test if the status is idle. If it is, we are going to run this function. Now the difference here is that when we load the component for the first time, we indeed have this set as idle. So this is going to run. However, when we go inside this function for the first time, we are going to change the value of status. So right here, we are going to do set status. We are going to change this to loading. So when we receive the summary, this is not going to run again because the status is not going to be idle anymore. So with this, we make sure that this function is going to be executed only once when we load this component. Now we set the status to loading, and when we receive the response back, not only we set the summary, but we also set the status to success. And this is going to be useful to add the loading state as well. Now just one thing we can do here, we can add a try-catch block, just so we don't have any breaking errors. So if everything goes well, we can do this. If not, we can just set the status to error, so we are able to handle it later. So again, we are going to start as idle. The use effect hook will execute once, which is going to call the get summary function. Once we run it for the first time, we are going to set the status to loading, and this is going to prevent the infinite loop that we had. Then we are going to try to connect with Google AI. If everything works correctly, we are going to change the status to success. So again, this will never run again because this is not idle anymore, but success. And we are going to set the summary state variable, which is going to make it show in the template. So this should now be working correctly. Let me save this, refresh the page. Let me choose the Paris picture again, open it up. And as you can see, this is not going to run again. Now, just one thing we need to add here is the loading state, because when we upload an image, we have this moment when we don't know what's going on before we receive the summary. So it is a good idea to add a loading state so the user know what is going on. So for that, let's go to the files. Let's create a new component called loader. Again, let's get this. For the structure, let's rename this to loader, and here as well. Now let's just add a div with a class of loader, and let's also create a CSS file for the loader. The same way we do with the components, it's also better that you separate your CSS. So right here, I'm going to create a file called loader.css, and I'm going to import it from here. So import loader.css. Now let's go find a loader for this. We can use the same one we used in the previous projects. So let's go to CSS loaders on Google. Here it is. We can use dots and you can choose any one you like. I'm going to stay with number 5. We copied. Remember, we need a div with a class of loader, which we already have. So we can just paste the CSS right here. Close the component. Let's just test if this is working. So in the summary, we can bring the loader component. Let's go up and don't forget to import it. So import loader from loader. We save this, and as you can see, the loader is now showing correctly. If you want, you can add a margin of auto, so it shows on the center like this. So now we are showing the loader, but of course, we don't want to show it every time. We just want to show it when the status is loading. So let's remember that we can easily do that with conditional rendering. So down here, what we're going to do is the following. Let's add the curly braces to add some JavaScript. And if the status is loading, then we are going to show the loader. Else, and now we can add another condition. So if the status is success, let's remember that this is the one we are using when we receive the answer from Google. So if the status is success, then we are going to show the summary. Else, then we can already add another one for the error, which in this case, we can just type something like error getting the summary. If not, we just don't show anything. So an empty string. So this way, when we load the application for the first time and we don't have anything, the status is idle, we are not going to show anything. Even if the component was visible, we were not going to see anything in this area. Only the summary title. Now, when it's loading, we are going to show the loader. When it changes to success, we are going to show the summary we received from Google. If it's error, we are going to show an error message. So this should look better for the users. We can now save this, refresh the page. Now we are going to choose a file. While this is loading, we are going to see the loader, and then when we receive the summary back, we can see the summary being displayed to the user. So this is now much better. So this is super cool. Just one thing that I'm missing here is showing a preview of the image we just uploaded. And for that, we need to go back to the file upload component, because remember that when we upload the file, let me just close the Explorer for now. When we upload the file, we are just storing the type because we need to inform Google, and we are storing the file as a base 64 string converted from the array buffer. And these are not enough for us to have a displayable URL. So for this, let's create another property when we create this object, and let's call it image URL. Now from here, we can use the native URL object, and the name of the method we want is called createObjectURL, and we can get this straight from the file. So we can just copy this, and now we are also going to store a URL that we'll be able to use to display the image. So we can save this. Let's go back to the summary, and once we go in, let me just do a console.log with the file we are receiving just to see how this is coming. Now we can refresh the page, upload the file, and as you can see, now we have the file in the base 64 string, we have the type, and we also have the image URL. So this is going to be enough for us to display it as an HTML image element. So if we scroll down now, right before the summary, the H2, we can add an image. And for the source, instead of using quotation marks, we can add curly braces so we can have something dynamic. And we are going to use file.image_URL. And here we can set the alt as preview image. We save this, and now we can see that a preview of the image is showing, and then we show the summary below. Now we can go up here, remove the console.log. So this is now looking much better. Let me just close the console just for now and do it again. So let's pick a file. Let's choose the one from Ronaldo instead, just to see if the sizes are okay. So as you can see, the image is too big. We need to add some margins and also limit it to a maximum of 100%. So let's do it now. If we go here, as we are not going to be changing the CSS much, there's no need to open a CSS file just for this. We can go to the index.css. So for every image that we have on our page, the max width is always going to be 100%. We do this, and now this is much better. Now we just need to add a margin bottom. So we can add something like 24 pixels. So this is going to show some space. Now we can close this file, and this is much, much better. So we start the application, we upload the file, let's maybe choose the painting, we see the painting, and now we have the summary coming from Google AI. So we are making some good progress. Now we need to check if this is working with PDF documents instead of images, and we might need to do some changes here because for PDF documents, we're not going to be able to display a preview like this. So let's go to choose file. Remember that I left a user manual for a drone in the course material. So let's click open. Now let's wait a while until we receive the summary. And now I'm seeing two main problems here. The first is that the code we use for the image preview is not going to work for PDF documents. So we are going to have to think of a workaround for this. And the second problem is that the summary is a bit too big, and Google is trying to use some markdown formatting, which is not going to work in this component. Of course, if you need longer summaries like this, you could create a component to render the markdown properly. This way, you would see line breaks and also bold texts. But for our example, let's just stick to a very simple and short summary. So the easiest thing we can do is to just adjust this prompt. Let's remember we are dealing with AI, so it is going to do exactly what we ask in the prompt. So for this, let me delete this prompt, and instead of adding simple quotation marks, I'm going to add backticks. This way, we're going to be able to break lines, and this is going to be better to read later. So let's ask it to summarize the document in one short paragraph. Then we can ask less than 100 words, for example. You can adjust this for your use case. And we can also ask to not send any markdowns or formatting. So let's write use just plain text with no markdowns or HTML tags. This way we make sure that we are not going to have this formatting issue. So we can save this, refresh the page. Let's try again. Let's upload the manual. Let's see if we're going to have a better summary. So as you can see, now we have a shorter summary that doesn't have the markdown, so it's much better for the user to read. So again, this is just an example. You can always adjust the prompt for your specific use case. For our example, this is good. Now the only thing we need here is to work on the image preview. So let's go back to the file upload component. Remember that here is where we define the image URL. And what we're going to do here is the following. We are only going to do this if we are working with an image. If not, we are going to show like a PDF file icon, which I think it's going to look good in this case. Remember that we only have PDF or the rest is just images. So we just need to test if we are working with a PDF, we do something. In all other cases, we just do what we were doing before. So first, let's do a console.log with the file, just so we can check something. Let's choose a file. And when we choose an image, let's see what is the type. Let me open the inspector. So we can see that the type is image/JPEG. Now let's try a PDF document. And we can see that now the type is application PDF. So what we can do here is the following. We can test if the type, now let me put this a bit bigger so we can see this better. So we can test if the type includes, so for that we can use the native includes method, which is going to look for a text in a string. Remember that this is a string, which is coming as application/PDF. So if this string includes PDF, then we are going to add our own PDF URL, which I'm going to write like this for now, just so we see if this is working. If not, then we are going to add the URL as we were doing before. Now let's see the difference. We can save this. Going back there, let's choose an image file. And we can see that for image files, this is working correctly. Now let's choose the PDF file. If we inspect this image, we can see that now we have that PDF URL text, which means that depending on the file type, we are creating different URLs. Now what we can do with this is the following. We can download an icon for PDF files, and if we are not working with images but PDF, then instead of showing the image preview, we just show the PDF icon. So for that, let's open the projects folder, and right inside the public folder, you can save an image file that I left right below the name of this lesson. So this is an image file called document icon.png. Let me preview this. So this icon is what we are going to show if we are dealing with PDF documents. So now that this is inside the public folder of the project, we can just go back here. And if we are working with a PDF file, what we are going to use instead is slash. This time we don't need the dot right here because we don't want to get it from the source folder, but from the public folder. So in React, everything that is inside the public folder, you can just access from slash, and then the name of the file is document-icon.png. All right, we do this, we save it. Let's try again. Let me choose a PDF file. And now we can see that since we are working with a PDF file type, we are showing the PDF icon, which is looking good. If not, let's try an image instead. We are going to see the preview of the image. So this is great. As you might have noticed in this course, I'm always worried about improving the user experience, as I think this is crucial for the success of any application we build. All right, this is great. Now there's one thing we still need to work on, which is the chat functionality. Because bringing in the summary from AI is cool, but this is not that useful. It would be much better if we could also ask AI questions about the uploaded document. So let's go to the File Explorer, and inside the Components folder, we can create a new component called Chat. Let me get the structure from the header and paste it here. Let me just replace the name of the component at the top and at the bottom. Now here, let's start with a section. Let's add an h2 and call it chat. And add an element for the chat. In the end, we can add an input area with a text input inside. Let me break a few lines because we are going to add more attributes later. For now, I'm going to add the placeholder, and let's write ask any question about the uploaded document. Now let's add a button so we can send the message. Now this is going to follow a similar structure from the chatbot project. We are going to have messages sent from the user and from the model. So let's add one from the user first. Let's add a paragraph element and the message. So just as an example, let me write, when was this photo taken? Now let's add a response from the model. This photo was taken in October 2019, just as an example. And let's also add an error message that we are going to show in case there's an error with the API. So error sending your message. Please try again. Now let me just add a class to the section so we can have these styles scoped to this element. I'm going to call it chat window. All right, now we can save this and the structure of the chat is ready. Now we need to make sure this shows after the summary. So let's go back to the app component. Let's import the chat component. And down here, let's remember that if we have an uploaded file, we are going to show the summary. If not, we are going to show the file upload. Now we just need to add the chat right after the summary. Now we are seeing this error because in React, inside ternary conditionals, we can only have one root element. We move these two elements inside, and now we don't see the error anymore. So we can save this. Let's go back to the chat component, and let's see how this is looking in the web browser. Let me pick a file. Now we see the photo, we see the summary, and we see the chat below. Pretty cool. Now let's work in the styles. I'm going to go to the components folder, and I'm going to add a new file called chat.css, and let's import it at the top of the chat component. So /chat.css. Now let's go back to the CSS file. And as I've mentioned in the beginning, in this project, let's not waste too much time writing styles. So you can go copy and paste the CSS code that I left. So let's do it here. Just pasted all the CSS code. This is very similar to what we've done in the chatbot project. I only changed it a little bit so it fits this structure. So we can save this, and this is how the chat is going to look. So here we have the user message in blue, we have the system message, and we also have an example of the error message. So this is cool. The structure of the chat is ready. So the first thing I'm going to do is to bring the useState hook to this component. And we are going to create a state variable to keep the messages. So let's remember we need the name of the variable, which is going to be messages, and also the setter function, which is going to be set messages. Now let's apply the useState hook. And as an initial value, this is going to be an empty array. Now let me add a few examples just so we can see if the messages are displaying correctly, and then we can go back to the empty array. Every message is going to be an object composed of the row. Let's add one for the user and also the text. Let me get this one as an example. This is one element of the array. Now let's add the other two just so we can test this. This is going to be a model message. And let's add another one for the error. Okay, now we can delete all the messages inside here. We save this, and now we see an empty chat. Now the importance of using a state variable for this is that every time we have a new message, the component is going to re-render automatically, and we will be able to see these messages. Now here, one improvement we can make is not showing this element with the gray background if we don't have any messages. So we can go here, add the curly braces, and if we have an array with a length bigger than 0, then we are going to show the chat. If not, we're not going to show anything. So we can save this, and we can still see the chat because we have these messages that we wrote manually. But if we have an empty array instead, we can see that now that element is not showing. So this looks a bit better. This is going to be the initial state when we don't have any messages. Now let's put the messages back. And in case we have messages, we're going to go inside, create the chat, and here we are going to run a loop so we can show each of the messages. So curly braces again, we're going to run a loop, and the most common way of doing this in React is with the map function. For every message we find, we are going to call it message or MSG. Let's create an arrow function, and let's add a template. So this is going to be the structure that we repeat for every message we find. And let's remember that we need a class name so we can identify if this comes from the user, the model, or if it's an error message. So class name. Now here to make it dynamic, instead of quotation marks, we're going to use curly braces, and we can use properties of each of the messages. So in this case, msg.row. Let's remember that that's the property we are using for these messages. Now we also need a key, so this loop runs properly. And for the key, I'm going to use msg.text. This is because it's not good to use the index. We don't have any IDs for these messages, which would be ideal. So to make sure that you're not going to have repeated keys, it's better to use the text itself. If you copy and paste the same message, this can be a little problematic, but this is not very likely to happen. So that's it. Now inside we have a p element, and we are going to show the text of the message. Now we save this, and we can see the messages showing exactly like we had before. But this time, it's coming from a state variable, which is exactly what we need, because when we send messages and receive the response from Google AI, we're going to be adding them to this variable, and we are going to see the chat window updated. Now here we can go back to an empty array, because now we see that this is working. We save this, we don't see that element anymore. Once we have new messages, we're going to start seeing them showing. Now before working in the Google part, let's handle the messages sent by the user. So the first thing we need is an on-click event for the send button. Let's remember that this is written in camel case in React. And here we are going to execute a function. In this case, we can create one called handle send message. So let's go to the top and let's create it here. Now we need to get the input from the user, but instead of getting from the value property of that input element, it is better that we leave in a state variable as well, so we can work with it more easily. So I'm going to copy this structure. Let's call this input and set input. And this is going to start as an empty string. Now we need to go down there, and for the input, we are going to set the value of it to whatever we have inside that variable. This way, if we want to clean this input, we just have to set that value to an empty string back, and we are going to erase the message in this field. Now we also need to add an onChange event. And for this, we are going to pass the event, and we are going to set the value we have in this field for that state variable. So set input. We're going to send the event.target.value. So this is going to make things easier. We can save this, and just to make a quick test, I'm going to do a console.log with the input. And remember that as this is a state variable, whenever this changes, the component is going to be re-rendered so we can see the updates. Now let's save this. Let's refresh the page. Let me open the inspector. We can see the console right here. Now, as soon as we start typing something like hello, we can see that this is being saved in this state variable, which means that whenever we click send, we just have to get the value of this variable so we can work inside the chat. So I just wanted to quickly show you this. Now let me close the inspector, and right inside this function, the first thing we're going to test is if we have something inside that input variable. So we can do input.length or just input. This is up to you. I prefer doing it like this. I think it's more clear. So if we have something, we are going to create a new variable for the messages. So let's call it chat messages. And to get started, we're going to create an array, and we're going to bring all the messages that we already have here. Since this is inside an array, we can use the spread operator to bring only the elements of that array. So whatever messages we have there, we're going to position them in the beginning. Then we can add a new one for the user message. So let's create a new object, and let's remember that we need a row. Let me just increase the size of the window here so we can see things better. So we need a row, which is going to be user. And we need one for the text. And this is going to be the input. Now, once we do this, we can go ahead and update that state variable. So we are going to have everything we had before plus the new one. Now, since the user message is already showing in the chat, we can go ahead and clean the input. And remember that since we are using the value of this variable as the value of the input, we only need to do set input and put it back to an empty string. All right, so now we can save this. Let's go back there and see if this is working. Let me refresh the page just in case. Now we have an empty chat. If we click send without any message, nothing is going to happen. If we type hello and send it, we can see that now our message is showing here, and we also clean the input. So this is great. As you may remember from the previous project, there is a specific method from Google AI we can use to start a chat. But in this case, it's going to be easier to just use the generate content method, just like we did with the summary, because this way it's easier to attach files to the messages. So let's go to the summary. We're going to have to repeat some code here. If you want to optimize this, you could create helper functions to open the connection with Google AI. For this example, since we only have two components, it's okay to just repeat these lines of code. So I'm going to get these two, go back to the chat, and we are going to create this at the top of the component so we can start the chat with Google Generative AI. Let's go back there again. Let's not forget to import what's needed. So we only need Google Generative AI from this library. Let's import it right here, and we are ready to use it. As I've mentioned, I'm going to use more or less the same structure we had here, because with this, we know that we are successfully sending the file, and this is exactly what we want for the chat as well. So I'm just going to copy all the try catch block, go to the chat, and once we go in, we test if there's a user input, we display it in the chat window, clear the input, and now we are ready to open the connection with Google. So I'm going to paste the try catch here. Let me just change this one to console.log. And inside here, we are going to send the file, and we are going to tell Google what we want from the model. So first, let's make some adjustments. We have an await here, so we need this function to be async. Now, another thing that we need is access to the file from inside this component. Let's remember that in the summary component, we are passing it as a prop from the app component. So let's do the same here. It's not on this function, but on the component function. So inside the chat function, we are going to add curly braces and pass the file. Now we need to go to the app component, and the same way we did with the summary, we are going to do with the chat. So we are going to have access to the file inside this component. So this is halfway what we need. We are creating this new variable, sending the file, and now we just need to adjust this prompt. So here we are going to ask something like answer this question about the attached document. Now, since we are using the backticks, let's add some dynamic information here. So this is going to be the message. Remember that we have this inside the input. Now let's give some extra instructions just to have the answers in the format we want. So I'm going to say something like answer as a chatbot with short messages in text only. No markdowns, tags, or symbols. Now I'm also going to attach the chat history. Remember, this time we are not using the chat method, we are using the generate content method. So we need to pass the history in the prompt. This is easy to do. We can just add chat history. Remember, we are dealing with AI, so we have a lot of flexibility here. Now we can just add the history. So we have everything inside the messages object. We just need to stringify it so we can place it here. So let's use JSON.stringify, and we are going to pass the array of messages. And this is enough for the model to understand the context, to get the question, follow the instructions, and give us the answer we need. That's great. So once this is ready, we are going to have the response from the model in this variable. Now we just need to add this message to the messages array. So first, let's use the local chat messages variable we created at the top. And again, let's create a new array, bring everything we had inside of itself plus the response from the model. So this is going to be a new message with the row of model and the text. Let's remember that if we go back to the summary component, the response comes in result.response.text. So this is exactly what we're going to use here. This is going to be the text of the message. And now we can just set the messages as the content of this variable. And we are going to see the updates shown in the chat window. Now this part is almost done. Let's just do something for the error case. So this is going to be similar. We can copy both lines of code. The only difference is that the role here is going to be error. And the text is whatever you want to put here. I'm just going to type something like error sending messages. Please try again later. All right, so if everything's correct, we should be able to chat with Google AI about our document. So I'm going to save this. Let's go back there. Now let's try asking some questions about this image. So we click send. This is going to take a few seconds, and then we have the response from the model. This is great. Now this is much better than having just the summary. So this is almost done, but let's add the loader so this looks a bit nicer. So one thing I'm going to do here is the following. When we add the user message to the chat, so right here, we are bringing the history we had before, adding the new user message. And right after it, I'm also going to add a loader. Let's remember that this element that we are creating is a div. We are creating it right here in the template, using the role as a class. So if we add a class of loader, let's remember that we have in our CSS the styles for an element with a class of loader. So this hopefully is going to be enough for the loader to show here. Now we just need to make sure to clear the text so we don't show any message inside the loader, and this should be enough for a loader to show. Let's give it a try. Let me send another message. When was it painted? Now we can see the loader, and then we see the response from the model, which is much better. The only thing we need to do is to remove the loader when we receive the answer. So once we receive the message, instead of bringing the complete array that we have, we are going to remove the loader first. So whatever we have inside this variable, we are going to apply a filter and make sure we only get messages that don't have the role set to loader. This will make sure to filter this array and remove any loader messages we have inside. So we just need to do the same thing for the error case as well. And this should be enough to remove the loader when we receive the answer from the model. Let's save this. Let's go back there. Let me try again. When was this painted? We send it, we see the loader, and when we receive the response, we remove the loader. So this is really cool. Now the functionality for this app is done. Now let's give it a try with the PDF document just to see if everything is working correctly. Let me add the manual for the drone. We see the PDF icon, which looks cool. Now we have the summary. And the cool thing is that now you can ask anything about this manual and you are going to have quick answers. For example, how do I take off? And it is going to check the manual and give you a summarized response on how to do the action you want. So this use case of product manuals in PDF is a really nice one for this kind of project. So that was all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Web Schools to support this channel. I'm leaving in the description of this video a link if you want to take my complete Gen AI for Web Apps course. By using the link in the description, you are going to get the biggest discount in the Udemy marketplace. In the course, you are going to build this and many other projects alongside exercises and discussions that will teach you everything you need to know to navigate this AI world as a web developer. Thank you so much. I'm Ivan Gomez, and I will see you next time.